This is Israeli Technology Founders Speak, a podcast of conversations with successful Israeli high-tech and biotech entrepreneurs. With your host, Avraham Hermon. Ben Wiener is the founder and managing partner of JumpSpeed, the first and only venture capital fund dedicated to investing in early-stage startups in Jerusalem. Avraham sat down with Ben in the offices of JMB Davis Ben-David in Jerusalem to discuss why Ben started JumpSpeed, what he learned from investing in day one startups, his successes and failures, and much more. This podcast is a creation of JMB Davis Ben-David, an intellectual property law firm serving clients around the world. You have great innovations. We keep them safe. It's not enough to just have a great startup idea or innovation. If you don't legally protect your innovations, products, and brand, anyone can claim them as their own. We keep your great innovation secure. Learn more by going to jmbdavis.com. That's jmbdavis.com.
I'm sitting here with Ben Wiener. Ben Wiener and I go way back to growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I'm happy to have you here in our Jerusalem office at JMB Davis Ben-David. And we're talking about JumpSpeed Ventures.
Happy to be here. I think I've probably known you since the day you were born.
Probably. And
I remember embarrass you.
I remember being at your bar mitzvah. What need does JumpSpeed Ventures fill?
I founded JumpSpeed about 10 and a half years ago to be the first and only VC fund, venture capital fund dedicated to the re-emergent Jerusalem startup ecosystem. So it's a hyper-local focused venture fund that only invests in day one, early stage startups that start their journey here in the capital. I started it because at the time in 2013, entering 2014, Jerusalem's startup ecosystem had been pretty dormant for a while for different reasons, and had kind of started to reemerge. And I felt that I was one of the first people to be privileged to stumble into that change, and that there was a supply-demand mismatch for capital in the capital. And I felt that there was room for a small fund to sort of come in and tackle or answer that problem for this small but very vibrant and diverse community.
So have others followed in your footsteps?
There are definitely other venture funds that have a presence here, but nobody's dedicated themselves exclusively to the ecosystem as I have.
Mm-hmm. So I had a look at your website before this meeting, and it looks like you have some successful exits and a robust portfolio of companies. What can you tell us about what you look for before you invest in a company?
So again, I'm looking to invest in what people call, two people, a dog, and an idea. So there's nothing built. I really prefer to be the first check for a day zero startup. So it's hard to find a lot to sink your teeth into other than the team and the idea. Having said that, I think there are certain characteristics of things that I and other investors like me who are inception stage investors look for. I would say the simplest way to formulate it would be a great line that I stole from Andy Rachleff, who's one of the premier long-term VCs in Silicon Valley, who basically distills everything down to one question for the founder, which is, what do you uniquely offer that people will desperately want? And I think there's so much buried in that one simple sentence or simple sounding sentence that's very, very complicated. Behind that simple question of what do you uniquely offer that people will desperately want is we're looking for a great team building a great product that's going to serve a great market. Mm-hmm. And even that is oversimplified. So it's behind those three things. What makes a great team? What makes a great market? What makes a great product? That you get into the weeds of what makes this so complicated. And I think I have even more frameworks and methodologies behind those three topics. And I've articulated some of those on the website, and I'm writing a whole book about what those things actually mean in practice for a startup founder. But to simplify it, I would say it has to be something incredibly unique, highly differentiated, that solves an unmet need or opportunity in such a radically different way that the market, or at least the important players in the market, will desperately seek that new solution.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned a book, okay? So let me just go off topic for a second. I know that you're also, I would say, a prolific author, right? You've written 2 novels so far?
I've published one. I've written the second, which is the one I just mentioned, and I hope to publish that in a couple months when it's ready.
Okay. So is it a novel?
So why, if you're a venture capitalist, are you writing novels?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised myself. I told people that I kind of surprised to find out that I was pregnant, and then found out I was pregnant with twins. I never thought I'd write a book, let alone a fictional novel. those two things came about because I had really two things that I wanted to try to teach, or that I was trying to teach in lectures, in meetings with founders, in talks with entrepreneurs. There were two topics that I kept coming back to as really, really important. And I felt I wanted to try to write them out at first in a sort of a nonfiction, maybe a blog post or something, but they got a little bit longer. And then I read a lot, and I had been reading, I guess, primarily the famous book called The Goal by Professor Eli Goldratt, who happened to be an Israeli professor who was trying to teach this wonky concept of constraint theory in manufacturing, which is about as dry as it sounds. And he decided to teach that through a novel. He wrote a fictional novel about a guy who's running a factory and gets into trouble with running his factory. And the whole thing is just a Trojan horse to teach his theory, Professor Goldratt's theory of constraint theory. And that book has sold, I think, to date, like 7 or 8 million copies. It's become a very, very successful story about this very arcane topic. So I had this idea of teaching these two topics that I wanted to teach through the Trojan horse of a story that would make it a little more engaging, a little more fun to read than just writing another, 6,000 or 10,000 word blog post that maybe 12 people would read. So that's how the idea started. I had been reading a lot about storytelling and researching storytelling for professional reasons, because I felt that storytelling is so key to a startup pitch and to pitching in general. And that led me to researching, script writing and novel writing and story structure anyway. And then as I was reading those things, I realized, wait, I have these two stories that I want to tell to teach something. And I started to draft, these two novels. And once they came to shape and I showed them to an editor and showed them to some people who really loved them, I said, okay, maybe I'll press the button and publish them and see what happens. So one is already published. It's called Murder at First Principles, which is teaching Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers competition strategy in a very strange serial killer murder mystery. And the second one, which will be published hopefully later this year or early next year, is called Fever Pitch, which is a story, unrelated story about a startup founder who can't pitch a startup to save his life until he needs to pitch a startup to save his life. And it's really a story about storytelling. It's a story about what is the proper structure, what is a bad startup pitch or an inferior startup pitch, and how does it transition into a successful startup pitch? Not to give away the spoiler, but there are plenty of other twists and turns in the story. I thought it'd be a more fun way to express these ideas than just put them out there in a blog post. So that's why I did it. Okay.
Sounds interesting. I'll have to look for them later.
I had a lot of fun writing them, and people have had a lot of fun reading them. But clearly, I want to maintain my. I don't want to leave my day job as a venture capitalist. But I did have a lot of fun, and there have been. I found it over the time. There have been a bunch of other authors that I've discovered who are professional in finance, or in business, who have on the side written these, very high quality novels to teach a topic. And I feel like I'm part of a small club of wacky people who want to teach through storytelling, which has been a lot of fun, and hopefully people find them fun to read.
Can you tell me about some mistakes you've made over the years and maybe different investments that you've made and how you've learned from them?
Well, this would probably be about a 1,000-hour episode if I went through all the mistakes I made. But I think, obviously you learn much more from your mistakes than from your successes. And thank God I've made plenty of mistakes. I think in the last 10 years since I became an investor, definitely made a whole bunch of mistakes. The primary ones that I think I would flag for listeners, for anybody listening, would be, I would say, categories of mistakes where when I started, I think I relied a lot on my own intuition. And I very, very quickly, thankfully, realized that there was no way as one person I was going to figure out everything I needed to figure out in the period of time I needed to figure it out. In terms of decision-making frameworks, just processes of filtering out the 100 startup ideas that you see to get to the one that you invest in. And so I forced myself to sort of embrace or re-embrace reading and learning. I became an investor at age 43. It's kind of late to start learning stuff, but I was driven enough to realize that I had to get out of my own skin and out of my own head and learn from as many other people as I could, as quickly as I could. And that sent me down a path of continuous reading, learning, which continues to this day. And I think I get more confident in my decision-making, the more humble I become, and the more I realize that I don't know that much. Because I know it sounds weird, but I get more confident because I'm just borrowing so much other learning from other people that are much smarter than me. So I can stand behind my decisions better by saying it's not just my own, gray matter that's between my two ears that's coming out with this decision. It's being informed by lots and lots and lots of really, really smart people who have shared their wisdom, which I've sort of stolen or borrowed to make my own decision-making process better. So I think mistake number one was relying too much on intuition. And then I quickly changed course and started to rely more on what I learned from other people to this day. And it served me incredibly well. Number two, a little more simple, but was just general like time management and process management, like actually writing things down. And again, working for yourself, for anybody listening who works for themselves, it's hard to manage yourself. So I forced upon myself processes of writing things down, keeping track of things in different ways that held me to a standard as if I was my own manager, if that makes any sense. And I think some of those things really had a big impact on how I was spending my time, how I was formulating decisions and articulating them in a way where if I had just been winging it, I would have come out with different, bad results.
So you force yourself to go through certain processes that you have basically dictated that have to happen before, let's say, investing.
Right. So I now, since 2017, I write an investment memo to myself for every investment that I make. And I know it sounds ridiculous. And by the way, most of these ideas I got from other people. I'm not that smart. So I actually had a conversation with somebody who directed me to start writing down my investment decisions as memos to myself. And it sounded really weird until I did it the first 2 times and realized, oh my God, like this is completely changing my methodology. And most importantly, saved me from making at least 2 or 3 investments that I would have made earlier. Where once I started to actually write them down for myself, I realized that there were paragraphs that I couldn't complete or sections that were missing because my own brain was tricking me into, falling in love with the founding team or skipping some other process that I myself claimed that I was doing, where in this case, I just was skipping that step. Once I had to write it down, I realized I was skipping a step and the answer wasn't there and had to turn around and say, I'm sorry, like I'm not investing. And, following those teams afterwards turned out that they didn't succeed. And again, I think that process saved me and saved my investors some nice chunks of change where in prior years, in the beginning from 2013 to 2017, I wouldn't have done that.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's good advice. You had mentioned 100 startups that or ideas that you've seen and investing in one. Is that around the number of that you at JumpSpeed Ventures are? That's
almost exactly the number, like precise, ridiculously close to the actual number. So I keep track of the deal flow. And over 10 years, it's been consistently around like 1.16% of what I've seen, I've invested in. And I've subsequently found out from reading that that's rumored to be the number, the prevalent ratio in early stage venture. Like people will say, the rule of thumb is 100 to 1 in early stage. It might be different for later stage when fewer companies make it to that stage. Right. So maybe you're investing in more. But as an early stage pre-seed investor, you want to be at around 1 to 100. And I've been without intention. Like I'd be happy to invest in 5 companies this year, but that would probably mean that next year I would invest in 1. So over time, it averages out to almost exactly slightly above 1.1% of what I've seen.
So that's really sounds like a lot of work. Looking at so many different companies, ideas.
I wish I could claim that it was a lot of work. And people get really upset when I say that it's not a lot of work. What I mean is when you have a methodology and you have like a framework of an analytic framework, it actually makes it very quick to filter out like 80% of the stuff that comes in where you don't even ask for a meeting because and you can say to the founder, thank you so much for reaching out. Or you say to the person introducing, thank you so much for making this introduction or for referring this to me. It's not what I do. Here's why. It's outside of my sweet spot because I don't invest in B2C apps. I don't invest in medical devices. I don't invest in this kind of thing. Or it's too late stage. Or, when you can articulate what you are looking for, it's very easy to say no to the things you're not looking for and to stand behind it and say, it's, like when you're dating, it's not you, it's me. I sincerely wish you the best of luck. It sounds really interesting. And most of the time it does. But it's just not in the sweet spot of the types of things that I am best at analyzing, the types of things that I'm best at helping, the types of things that meet the criteria that I've imposed on myself for investing. So, you may find better luck with another investor who's looking for different kinds of things, but it's not for us or at JumpSpeed. And so having an articulatable framework makes it really easy to filter that top 80, 85%, and then drill down on the 15% that you need to get down to 1% to invest in. It also enables me to be somewhat nicer than I think the average VC when I'm rejecting. So every company that pitches me or that reaches out gets a response. Nothing gets ignored. And I can give a response that's sincere. Like, I really wish you the best of luck. It's not for me. It's an unequivocal no. I'm not, dragging you along or stringing you along. Keep me posted, which is another signal for I'd like to say no, but I'm too afraid to say no. So I say no, it's not for me. This is why. Here's my sweet spot. And founders really appreciate it. Some of them have come back with their friends because they know that I'm not looking for what they're doing, but they know now what I am looking for. So they'll bring me somebody else. One founder even brought me his father to invest in the fund. He said,
Wow.
I so appreciated the way you said no, that I'd like my father has some money and he'd like to invest in your in your fund. It was bizarre. But like, if you do it the right way, it can have other benefits as well.
It sounds like it's a win-win.
And it's definitely a good time management exercise, because you don't waste time going down rabbit holes that you're not going to end up, investing in. So I can really free up a lot of my time to focus on portfolio companies, to focus on the ones that I'm drilling down, to read a lot. So again, getting back to time management, having processes in place has other benefits, which include, using time much, much more efficiently and having a lot of windows of free time to be able to swoop in and help or jump to something else if I need to. So it has a lot of other benefits that I didn't realize at the time.
So you told me about what you've learned from the mistakes. Now tell me a little bit about your successes and what you've learned from them.
Well, my successes only mean that I was fortunate to invest in successful teams that did a lot of hard work and produced something amazing. So I've been privileged to have invested in companies like Breezometer, which is probably my best success to date, which was our first major exit. Breezometer was acquired by Google a couple of years ago for $200 million. And we were the first investor in the company. So, you get a nice financial reward for having conviction early. Obviously, we invested at a much lower valuation than what they exited at. And that exit was enough to return that whole first fund multiple times, made a lot of investors, money who had, had conviction in me and my weird thesis of investing in Jerusalem. So it had a lot of other benefits too, aside from the financial ones. Breezometer was a fantastically successful outcome for us. And they really accomplished something that was non-consensus, but turned out to be right, which was measuring, of all things, air quality to a granular pinpoint location. A lot of investors saw that early on. I wasn't the only one that had seen it. A lot of investors saw it and didn't think that that could become a big business. I had, through a bunch of conversations with them, uncovered some other opportunities that I thought were significant, and they turned out to be right. So we were very, very fortunate, and the team did all the work. I was just along for the ride, with my fund, and they did tremendous work. We've had a couple other ones that have taken off like that, like Full Path here in Jerusalem, which is an exceptional company. We're the first venture fund that invested in that company at inception, pretty much shortly after a couple other small investors put some money in. So again, you get into a couple of those really early. When they take off, it's incredibly, incredibly exhilarating. And you're just you're happy for yourself and your investors, but you're just so proud of the team and what they were able to, the challenges they were able to overcome and the things they were able to figure out that, frankly, if I had been sitting with them, I don't think I would have been smart enough to identify, but they were so sunk into their markets and so smart that they were able to navigate, compete, and succeed. So those are incredibly exhilarating. Aside from the money is great. And it's my job is to make money for the people that trusted me with their assets. I understand that. But there's an emotional side to it of overcoming obstacles and being partnered with people who are just exceptional. That is very invigorating.
So you had mentioned Jerusalem at the beginning of our discussion. What's unique about Jerusalem, and why Jerusalem of all places in Israel or in the world? And when everyone knows that Israel's Silicon Valley isn't here.
Yeah, so I want to be careful about the way I present it because I don't want to offend anybody. But I think I have offended some people over time. Again, Jumpspeed started in 2013 because there was not enough capital in the capital. And Tel Aviv is not that far away. It's about an hour away in traffic on the highway. It's not a geographic distance. It's the distance between Palo Alto and San Francisco. And really, I'll just quote other people. Like one venture capitalist in Tel Aviv said to me when I met him a couple years ago, and he said, "I understand, you only invest in Jerusalem?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Because you guys don't come there. Or enough." I didn't say you don't come there at all. I just said you don't come there enough. There's a lot going on there that you just don't know about because you're busy here. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to stop you." He said, "You're 100% right. When I travel to Silicon Valley, I will have a meeting in Palo Alto in the morning, a meeting in downtown San Francisco in the afternoon, and a meeting in Palo Alto in the back in the end of the day. And it doesn't bother me. And it's in traffic, it's even more than an hour each way." He said, "Every time I need to go to Jerusalem, I say to my wife, 'Darn it, I need to go to Jerusalem today.'" He didn't say "darn it." He said something else. And he smiled at me and he said, "I don't know what it is about Jerusalem that I just don't enjoy going there." And again, that's me quoting somebody else. It's not me, inferring something. That's a direct quote.
Truth is, we've had that sort of situation as well. We were at one point only in Jerusalem. Now we have 2 offices. But I've had people say to me, "Wait, you're in Jerusalem? Can't you come to me for a meeting?" Right. So even though they're in Tel Aviv, they're not so far away. Right.
So the question is, why did that happen? And I don't even blame the investors who didn't come here for years, because for years, from about 2001, when the bubble burst and the second intifada broke out, until about 2013, there wasn't much going on here. I mean, there was, but not at the non-biotech startup scene that now I thrive in. So there were no accelerators here. There were very few venture capital investors of any kind here in town. So there was a dry spell here. And by 2013, 2014, there's a whole new generation of investors in Tel Aviv that had never come to Jerusalem because there was nothing for them to see. So I don't blame them for getting, comfortable where they were and not being aware that things were changing. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody else. But the fact was that in 2013, when things started to spin up again here in Jerusalem, nobody was paying attention, or the people that were likely to pay attention were busy elsewhere. And I felt there was an opportunity to sort of grab it, and that it didn't have to be huge for a small fund to prosper in that kind of environment. Now, the next question is, and I'm not doing both jobs here, but the next question you should ask me is, okay, but it's 10 years later. Like that first mover advantage, even if you claim, Ben, that it's true, doesn't last forever. So how do you compete today? And the answer is, well, Tel Aviv has continued to just take off amazingly so that they still have tons and tons of deal flow to keep them busy there. So they can be busy morning till night looking at Tel Aviv companies. They don't have to come here. And the second answer is, yes, there has been more investment here, thankfully. We welcome more investment in Jerusalem. And then three, or C, or whatever, number three, I've had to change my competitive approach to say, okay, I welcome other investors to be here. I just want to win deals now by being something else, by being faster, by having a better reputation in town or whatever, or just having better relationships so that I can, get there first when there's something interesting. So my competitive standing changes a little bit. And again, I've become the chairman of a very important organization here called Made in Jerusalem, which is sort of the nonprofit entity that supports the entire startup ecosystem of Jerusalem. As the chairman of Made in JLM, I want more investors to come here. I don't,
sure.
As Jumpspeed or as Ben, yeah, I want to get, the great cherries on the top of this beautiful sundae for my fund, but I don't claim to get all of them, and I don't need to get all of them for this to be a viable ecosystem or for my fund to be successful. There's enough to go around, and we encourage and welcome other investors to come here and see. We'll show them around. I have shown other investors around here, even though in one meeting one of the founders said, "Wait a second, aren't you guys competitors?" And we looked at each other. We said, "Yeah, I guess so, but that's not the way it works here. Like, we want other people to come here and invest." So at this point, 10 and a half years in, I'm comfortable with our position. It's changed a little bit. So we want to be the go-to investor, not the only investor in Jerusalem, but it still works well. And we still get to see some amazing opportunities here, even this year, even with all the crazy things that are going on in this country. And it's an important day to recognize, what's going on here. The quality of deal flow, the quality of the entrepreneurs still in the city, in Jerusalem, continues to astound me.
So let's expand a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Today is actually October 7th. It's 1 year after the Hamas initiated massacre, kidnapping against Israelis. What impact has that war that we're still in had on startup scene and investment scene here in Israel, and in particular in Jerusalem?
Well, first of all, we're people. Like, the war has had a direct personal impact on me, a deep emotional impact. We can't ignore it and we can't minimize it. Like, this has been a heartbreaking year for us individually, for us as a family, for us as a people, for us as a country. And that trickles down into every aspect of our lives, personal, professional. It's affected everything. To say that it hasn't impacted anything would be disrespectful and ridiculous. So of course it's had a dramatic impact emotionally.
Yeah.
What's wild is that, again, if I look at the deal flow volume for Jumpspeed, Q4 of 2023 was a disaster, and basically there was no activity. But it was as if January 1st, 2024, the entrepreneurs, at least in Jerusalem, came out of the woodwork. And so far in 2024, I'm tracking deal flow that's above, in terms of quantity, 2022. So we're back to seeing people trying new things, starting new things with all the ache and all the pain and all the emotional toll that this year has taken on all of us. The world of innovation the wheel keeps turning. People still want to solve important problems that are, affecting all of society using technology. And a fair amount of that is happening here in the capital. So the war has had a deep psychological, emotional toll on us, but the startup ecosystem has rebounded. And if anything, what I've told my investors is that we've seen this kind of superhero mentality among these startup founders. I've seen things. I told my limited partners in my fund, starting in the beginning of the year of 2024, I knew that we invested in some amazing people because that's why I invested in them. But to see how they reacted to the startups are hard enough. To see how they reacted to the ridiculous crisis, the crazy things that happened to them, to their coworkers, to their companies, and not only managed to survive, but in most cases were able to close deals, to close investment rounds through the end of 2023 and into 2024. These people are like superhuman. Like we were privileged to invest in some incredible superhero personalities I kind of thought that they were amazing when I found them, but oh my God, have they like proven to us how incredibly resilient is not even the right word. It's beyond resilient. It's incredibly superhuman what they were able to do. And I think that applies not just to the Jumpspeed portfolio, but to the entire startup ecosystem of Israel. So we've seen incredible things. Unfortunately, through the lens of this terrible crisis, which I wish had never happened, but at least it's enabled us to see the true grit and resolve and resilience of this ecosystem that we've, bet everything on. And we believed in before, but now we have even more of a reason to continue to believe in.
So that's a very encouraging answer. I'm glad that we discussed that.
I think as tragic as this year has been, and we cannot sugarcoat the tragedy in our family, in our city, everybody knows somebody, everybody's related to somebody.
Yeah. We just met, last time we met was at a funeral of a soldier killed in action.
Correct. And we've been to too many of those. So can't sugarcoat it, can't say that there's any silver lining. Like those terms don't apply. This is a terrible, horrific tragedy. And I have sons and sons-in-law who are actively engaged in the Army right now. It's very, very traumatic for all of us. But the only but is that we were worried about this generation, right? The ones of us who are a little bit older were worried that our kids, might not be, engaged, whatever you want to say, committed, idealistic. We now know that that's not true. Right. I mean, this young generation has thrown itself into defending this country, standing up for this country, standing up for what we need to believe in. And it's been a source of a tremendous amount of angst, but a tremendous amount of pride that we may not have realized or known about if we hadn't had this terrible tragedy. So again, not trying to use the phrase silver lining because it's not the right phrase, but there's something optimistic that comes out of this deep tragedy.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about IP. What role does IP have in your investment strategy?
So IP has a role depending on the company. So not to talk my own book literally, but I mentioned the first book I wrote was was based on Hamilton Helmer's iconic book, 7 Powers, which he published, I believe, in 2016 or 2017. The point of Helmer's book is really to identify the 7, and he claims there are only 7, characteristics of long-term successful innovation-based companies. So he basically figures out that there are one or more of these 7 characteristics are the things that a successful company needs to have persistent differential returns. Only one of those 7 is what he calls a cornered resource, or what we would call proprietary technology. There are 6 other characteristics or strategies that companies can use to effectuate a competitive barrier or moat. But IP is clearly one of the best ones, and one of the ones that's available earliest to a company. So in Helmer's methodology, there are only 2 characteristics or strategies that are available at inception. One is cornered resource / proprietary IP, or some sort of legal monopoly over what they're doing. And the only other one that's available at inception is what he calls counter-positioning, where you have such a competitive offering that is so directly competitive to the incumbents that they're powerless to compete with your business model. So think like Netflix competing with Blockbuster. Blockbuster would have had to shut down all of its stores to compete with streaming Netflix.
I see.
So since those are one of the only 2 that are available at inception, we see a lot of IP-centric companies at early stage because that's one of the things that they're relying on to claim that they have a differentiation. So we have a fair amount of deep tech in the portfolio, heavy IP portfolios, lots and lots of patents, but it's not the only thing that we'll look for. There are other kinds of companies where they're just not a deep tech-oriented company. And then if we see one of the other 6, either now or in the future available to them, we could still make the investment at day 0. It'll just be based on a different thesis than something proprietary. And I would say Jerusalem, one of the buckets of innovation that Jerusalem features is, and a lot of it, orbits around the university, Hebrew University, and some of the other, colleges and universities here. If you're going to invest in early stage Jerusalem startups, you have to have good muscles for IP, because you're going to be seeing a lot of deep tech, a lot of IP-centric activity. So it is something that I need to be prepared, or not just prepared, but ready and willing to see, because we have a lot of it here in Jerusalem. Again, I don't need to tell you, IP is not just having a lot of patents does not guarantee success for a startup. They have to have great team, great ability to execute. But if you are doing something in deep tech, you better make sure you have strong IP, and, you can plug the hosts, but, very, very strong IP counsel, so that you make sure that your patents are not just extensive, but also written properly, so that they can, block competitors from finding a way around them.
Sure. So you had mentioned being proud of companies that you had invested in. What sort of role does Jumpspeed take in companies after investment?
I try to be very clear with founders when I do invest in them. So clear that I actually give them a document called Working with Ben. Again, this is all my best ideas I stole from other people. I heard an interview once with an executive, And she said that every new hire gets this like Google Doc called like Working with Linda or whatever her name is. Because she said she would have this like 20-minute conversation with them when they joined the company. And it would be the same speech over and over again. And then finally she said, I'll just write it down in a document and give it to them and save myself the time. So the document that I give them is very, very clear about what they should, not just can, but should expect from me or demand from me, and what they should not expect from me. So that we have clear expectations going into the relationship, because it is a relationship. It's a multi-year relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty clear about the way I can help and the way I expect to help and the way they shouldn't expect me to help. So the two ways that I expect to help as a day zero investor. So I'm usually, like I said, the first check, the largest check. So that really the first money in the company. I want to be their Sherpa or their navigator, their assistant to navigate the jungle, which begins when they start operating, and the jungle stage ends when they get to product market fit and get to the next round of funding. I want to get them through that jungle, which is going to be a lot of twists and turns and a lot of dangers and challenges and everything that a jungle metaphor represents. I'm going to be their, I don't want to even say guide, because I myself don't necessarily know the way, but I'm going to be along to help them navigate that jungle and on a daily or weekly basis, help them make decisions, almost always taking their lead. Like I'm not telling them which way to go because I myself don't know. They're the ones who are experts in their field, but I want to be the eyes and ears alongside them with a little more experience or maybe with a little more knowledge or reading from elsewhere to guide them to making those pivotal decisions. And I say pivotal, like literally, they'll often have to pivot and change direction, and just explaining to them that that's okay. When they get panicked at that first change of direction, like, oh shoot, we need to do something differently. And then they turn to me almost like embarrassingly and say, oh, we're really sorry to tell you this, but we need to change direction, as if I'm going to be angry at them because I invested in one thing and now they have to do something a little bit different. And I'll cheer them on usually and say, no, that's great. Because what were your expectations? My expectations were not that you were going to march into the jungle and march out in a straight line. I expected there to be some twists and turns. No matter how much conviction I had about the thesis originally enough to invest, I also understood that we're probably going to have to change course a couple of times as we learn more about the market. But just being that encouraging, supportive, contemplative set of eyes and ears is number one. But again, not in a vacuum. To get them to product market fit, everything has to serve the god of product market fit to get them out of the jungle. And number two, helping them get that next round of funding. If it means introducing them to the next investor, which I've done a bunch of times, or just guiding them on how to pitch or how to present or how to position themselves with the next round investors. So I've done that a lot. Everything else is kind of gravy. And I've been fortunate to have earned, and I believe it's earned, the slot of being like the first phone call even after that. Even when there are other investors on the cap table, I really take a lot of pride when the founders will call me, middle of the night, whenever, with an emergency. I expect there to be emergencies. I expect there to be crises. I don't always even expect to have the right answers, but I love being the first phone call so that we can kind of try to work through it together. And there are a couple of great examples of some of the successful companies that I mentioned before, where there have been some of those late night phone calls when things weren't so great, and we were able to get through them together. And I'm really, really happy. Some investors get annoyed but I think most of us would like to be in that position where we get that phone call and are able to help get through those tricky situations.
Okay, sounds good. This is a really great conversation. I'm glad you took the time and visited here in our Jerusalem office.
It's always great to see you.
Good to see you too, and wishing you lots of success to you and your companies and your investors. And hopefully we'll hear a lot of more good news.
Hopefully all of us and in this whole country, we should hopefully have a very happy, healthy, and successful year.
Thank you.
That was Ben Wiener, the founder and managing partner of JumpSpeed. We hope you enjoyed this episode. There are many more to come. Do you have a great innovation or startup idea? We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us by going to our website, jmbdavis.com. And if you go to jmbdavis.com/startup, you'll see we have a special site specifically made for startups to help startups protect their innovations. Please be in touch with us and find out how we can help you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode.